Hello everyone, thank you for being here. And today I'm going to talk about men, their place in society and what's going on with them. So to begin my talk, let us first take a few seconds to visualize what we see when we talk about thinking about a man. So typically what comes to the mind of everyone as per the casual dealing with daily life is somebody who is a leader, somebody who is strong, invincible, somebody who's holding the weight of the entire earth on their shoulders. And by the world, it means the world for a man is the family, the breadwinner of the family, a lot of pressures around, but somebody with the strength to be able to deal with it all. This is how the world and this is how the normal people would portray men. But how I see men is entirely different. And this is also something that is close to reality, how I see men. So let me begin with some examples that I see when I practice and deal with men daily, in and out. For the last 15 years I've been doing it. Let us talk about a man who was anxious in speaking with public or probably talking to the opposite gender. He came to the friends with this problem that, I am having this sort of a situation. And the friends were no better. But what the man got to hear was ridicule, laughter, about him being weak. So this is how his friends and his society around that man addressed the issue. Now that man is married. He's been about 5 years of his marriage. He's not been able to really talk about anything with the partner. And they're on the verge of separation. This is how I see the man. The other example, for example, there was a man who was in a relationship with a partner, and the partner compared his manhood with somebody else. And now that man has been over that trauma for the last 12 years. He's 42, he's still not married. It hasn't given, it's taken a lot of courage to come over and talk to me about it, but this is what happens to men when they go out and, when they face the real world. Those muscular, strong, invincible men. And lastly, an example, something that usually now we hear in the news. A man who came to me, a lot of breathlessness, doctor, I wanted to see you. I said, yes, tell me, what's the problem? Doctor, I'm all fine otherwise, and then suddenly he collapsed, and I couldn't save him. So these are the men which are in the real ground. And it's not just me who has had this experience with men. This is what even the real world says. This is what the literature says. Why do men live less than women? Now we know that if you look at the gap of longevity, our men are dying 5 years earlier than women. So the average age for a man and his longevity is now 68.4 years globally. And for women it is 73.8 years. And this gap is not just the global gap, the overall gap. It's basically a gap that exists at every level, right from the time that the man is a baby boy. At first year of age itself, the men, they are suffering more with diseases, with low immunity, and they are succumbing to diarrheas and respiratory tract infections. We have literature to support this. And as men reach the age of 25, then again the gap widens, because they are the men who are basically falling prey to road traffic accidents, to substance abuse, to mental health issues and suicides that culminate in death. Eventually leading up to the coffin, where the chronic ailments, the heart disorders, the diabetes, the major killers of human race, they all affect men more commonly and more easily than women. But often my wife says, when you talk about men's health, you're talking about these numbers and statistics. How do they really matter? What matters is the life in the years. And that's where the real problem is. If the problem is not that they're living less, or they're leaving widows, or they're leaving families bereaved, the problem is that the quality of life that they're living actually is also something that is dismal. They're just suffering in silence. Because the way I see a man is somebody with bottled up emotions, somebody who's in a lot of stress, somebody who is running the hamster grind wheel, and end of the day he's just being judged. The reason why I kind of get to see these men talking about their candid things is because they are coming to me with an illness. But when they see a judgment-free space, when they see an expert who is not ridiculing them or he's listening out to them, then they come up with more of their struggles than their illnesses. And that's how I know how the man of today is doing. And this is probably one of the things that I'm going to talk here today. So what is men's health? Men's health as in some somebody who's coming with the issues and talking about the problems. Because this is, again, a sort of a misconstrued term, men's health, because most of the time when I talk about men and men's health, people think of it that it's a talk about men's sexual health. But it's not just that. In fact, the men's sexual health is also linked to a lot of other health parameters, which we will discuss today. So basically, men's health is something that talks about prostate, an organ which is specific to men, and other organs which are specific to men. It talks about problems that are more common in men compared to women, and it also talks about problems that affect men more commonly than the women, or more severely than the women. And talking about the prostate problem, for example, now we all know that men have prostates. So I'm sure that some men do not know they have prostates, that's okay. But by common knowledge, most men by the age of 50 would know that they have something called a prostate. And any problem of the prostate, wherein they have problems in urinating, is actually linked to something which we call metabolic syndrome. So it's not just a problem of urine that they're facing. Actually, it's a process that is going on in the entire body for men. And eventually, if we talk about the other important aspect of men's health, which is fertility. Fertility is now, as per research, indirect or direct indicator of how the health of man is doing. And let me tell you a shocking figure that in the last 50 years, we found that the fertility is declining to about 50%. It declined actually more than 50%. And just imagine what will happen in the next 50 years if this is the trend that continues. It is safe to say that if fertility is a marker for men's health, then the men's health itself is declining by 50% in the last 50 years. And then again, if we talk about erection issues, erectile dysfunction, it's actually an endothelial dysfunction, because we have the same arteries which are, performing this function just like the arteries of the heart or of the brain. So actually, this is an endothelial dysfunction which is also a predictor of heart attacks and strokes in the future. So if somebody has a problem right now and he doesn't talk to me about it, then there's a likelihood that in the next 5 to 10 years, he may actually be ending up in the ICU with a heart attack or stroke. So these are very significant problems. They are not just sexual problems, so to say. They're actually affecting the entire body. And it's not just these. There are more problems that men have about their bodies, about their hormones, the way they are being given testosterone to make a muscular body to chase the image that we all have in our mind, that Herculean image. But then we also have stress, we have burnout, we have peer pressure. We know suicides are more common in men, about 4 to 5 times than compared to women. So basically all these issues form the basis of men's health. But why does it actually happen? Why are men actually facing these issues? Is it just because of the society? Is it just because of the lack of health care for men? No, it all starts with the genes. It starts here with the Y chromosome, which is basically a degraded form. Now it's come down to about 50 genes comparing to the 3,000 gene strong X chromosome. So we all know that men, they have an X and a Y chromosome, while women, they have 2 X chromosomes. So just imagine that something happens to the X chromosome that men have. They don't have the other X chromosome to take over the functions of that X chromosome, because they have something else. They have a Y chromosome, and Y chromosome is just 50 genes. And again, it has just information for them to be made a man. It doesn't have really any significant information. So that makes them more prone to a lot of genetic illnesses. So starting from the genes itself, men are actually the weaker sex, so to say. And then comes the attitude, comes the testosterone, where the men have a higher risk-taking behavior, which means that they're the ones who are engaging in wars, they're the ones who are actually working on the rooftops and high rises, they're the ones who actually are roaming without helmets on the bikes. So this kind of an attitude comes with the genes. And there are a lot of memes around it. We have all seen why men die younger. And memes like these where men are actually working under the cars without any protection. Another important reason is that when men talk about their problems to society, they are being ridiculed, as we just discussed. So for a man, it's all about profession. They are the breadwinners. So when they talk about their personal problems, men feel that the one who is going to be in business with them is going to be exposed to their weaknesses, and their colleagues, their peers can all exploit their weaknesses. So this is one of the other reasons why men don't show their wounds to anyone. And when it comes to the toxic work environment that they're facing, they often resort to something called substance abuse, because that's the only way to increase efficiency for them. That's the only way to take their troubles off for a little while. And that's what's happening. Even when it comes to healthcare, I would just want to interact with the audience and with a show of hands need to understand how many of you have heard about doctors for women. Just by a show of hands, do you know who a doctor for women is? Have you heard about a gynecologist ever? Yes, so that's something that's very common. So when we also did our research around who is the doctor for women, 96% of the men actually, in the same city we'd done the research, they were able to tell that the gynecologist is a doctor for women. Or there's a lady doctor who is a doctor for women. But when we asked these men the same question, who is the doctor for man, then they had no answer. There was just a long pause. Because actually speaking, most of the men, even in this room, would not know that there's a doctor for men for their problems. And such doctors are called men's health experts or andrologists. The other problem or the other flaw with healthcare is that while women are exposed to healthcare very often, for example, if we look at the timeline here about how often men versus women are getting exposed to healthcare, we know that all of them are given their shots when they're babies. So that's when you don't even know that you're a man. And at that time, it's your last exposure to healthcare. And then men would then go to healthcare only when they have a debilitating illness, when they are not able to work. Between this point, there is nothing that supports men as in terms of healthcare. There is nobody to tell men that what is ejaculation, what is nightfall. You don't have fathers or andrologists or teachers telling you that. For women, there are people guiding them about their periods. So for women, everything starts in a very particular designed way. So there are people who get women to counsel when they have their first periods, then when they take their HPV shots, then when they have their childbirth, when they're looking for contraception, and eventually when they also grow up into a chronic health illness affected body. So by design, actually, men are not exposed to healthcare. They're not actually getting the avenues to actually interact with a doctor. But yes, we can bring a change in this. We can bring a change by introducing healthcare to men at different avenues. For example, when they get a job, they should be required to see a doctor, to get the screening done, to ask questions that they've never asked, like the 3 scenarios where we interacted with men and made a difference in their lives. Apart from that, there are avenues where you can do an executive health checkup, where you can do a premarital health checkup. These kind of concepts are still way behind in our society, where we can make a difference by interacting with men. Another important thing that we can do around men is to glorify or gamify their screening or their things. And by this we mean that we are actually making men go to the centers by giving them incentives to go, maybe a promotion, maybe interactions, maybe something they love, something they like, and make them interact and get their health back to the basics. There are a lot of mountains, and women in this can help too. So it's not just a man thing, because men, if they're healthy, it means there are better, healthier families, there are better, healthier partners, they are financially well. So it's not just about being a man, and it's not about just a men's health. It's an overall health issue that we are actually talking about when we talk about men's health. Because there are various mountains that men have to surmount every day. There are fears of stress, self-neglect, self-guilt, and even sometimes toxic masculinity and toxic self-reliance. So together we have to deal with all these issues and help men conquer the mountains. Thank you so much for your lovely time.